My name is Chauncey DeVega. I'm a politics writer for the online news magazine Salon. You may have seen my essays referenced in places like MSNBC, The Washington Post, Slate, USA Today, The Atlantic, or Newsweek. And you may have heard my voice on NPR or the BBC. My goal? The relentless pursuit of moral, philosophical, empirical, and creative truth. You are listening to The Truth Report with Chauncey DeVega. Chris Hedges is the guest on this installment of The Truth Report. He is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, author, and philosopher. Hedges' most recent book is America, The Farewell Tour. There, Chris Hedges both details the country's many cultural and political crises and what could potentially happen next. The pandemic has shown his analysis to be eerily prescient. On this week's installment of The Truth Report, Hedges also warns that the tumult and pain of Trump's pandemic is but a preview of far worse things in America's future, as social inequality and political failure combine to create a full-on collapse of the country's already declining standard of living, as well as its ailing democracy. If you were going to take a snapshot of this moment this week, the last 10 days, what would you see? What would that snapshot look like? Because again, we need to ground ourselves historically, some sort of historical memory, writing things down, you know, the way that the world and this country can change in a week.
The last 10 days are called the good times.
How do things change that fast?
They change that fast because the underlying structures are rotten. So you have the patina or the veneer of a functioning system, but the foundations are so decayed that they can't take the stress. And that was true in Weimar. That was true in Yugoslavia when I, of course, covered the conflict there. And that's true here. We can't take the stress, either the health stress or the economic stress. We're just not prepared for it. So we've kind of papered over the decaying edifice without looking very closely at the underlying structural rot that makes that edifice so weak. I mean, that's something I've tried to do in my writing consistently. You know, there aren't a lot of us. We're not, those of us that have consistently done that are marginalized, not just by the mainstream, but by the liberal elites themselves. I mean, look at the Democrat Party response to this. The only thing they're trying to block is a $500 billion slush fund that's going into the hands of someone, Mnuchin, who is a criminal. But the whole is laughable or ludicrous that their response is to send everyone $1,000 or whatever it is, and not everyone, of course. And that is going to get vacuumed right up by the credit card companies, and the banks hold the mortgages, and that's it. And then they are going back to 2008, where they are dumping staggering sums of money into the hands of Wall Street thieves. We know what happened in 2008. They bought back their own stock. They gave themselves massive bonuses. Again, the economy is so fragile that it can't take that shock. So I don't see how we're going to avoid a really serious depression and further consolidation of power by an authoritarian oligarchic elite. And they're not worried because they'll have ventilators and private medical staff and all the things that we won't, and they'll take care of themselves.
And to have the president of the United States articulating it, saying it without shame or fear or embarrassment, people will die. People are going to have to die. Thinking about Fox News and propaganda, that you have a huge part of the population that has internalized that ethos, and they're willing to go out there to die.
You're right. I would add that huge numbers of people are going to die unnecessarily. But with the primacy of profit, they're willing to create a situation where more people die. And you're already seeing on Fox News a kind of downplaying of the, I watch it, by the way, I just read about it, but you're seeing a downplaying of the severity of the virus, and you have a significant portion of the population, 40+%, who believe this garbage. And then you're seeing the spike in racist attacks against Chinese Americans or any people of Asian descent. They don't discriminate, just like after 9/11, they were beating up Sikhs who they thought were Muslims. So You already have on the Democratic side, but remember, calls to shut down the primaries. I think this could lead us down into virtually uncharted territory within the United States, because as things deteriorate, the violence against those vulnerable groups that are demonized, which include almost basically anyone of color, and the desire for an authoritarian solution will grow more pronounced. I remember speaking to Fritz Stern, the great scholar of fascism who himself fled Nazi Germany as a teenager, and he said in Germany there was a yearning for fascism before the word fascism was invented. We already see that yearning, but I think that in a time of crisis, that yearning will become more pronounced.
So on one hand, you have hopeful voices saying, okay, this will create change. It's necessarily going to have to create change. But you know what? Okay, because Americans have no memory. Well, how do we know folks just won't go back to business as usual 2 weeks from now or a month from now and then throw this down the memory hole?
Yeah, well, I don't think we're going to be able to go back. I think that the coronavirus is going to trigger a decline unlike anything the country has seen since the Depression. And that's, of course, why the business and the ruling elites are freaking out and why telling people to go back to work but wear masks, which they know is useless. You know, the fact that we were unprepared for the pandemic. Pandemics come and go throughout history. We knew from the swine flu, we knew from MERS, we knew from Zika virus, we knew that something was coming. And yet, of course, especially under the Trump administration, we dismantled the mechanism by which we could prepare. And then the infrastructure, the hospital beds and the ventilators and all of that isn't there because, like all decaying empires, everything goes to the defense industry and the military. You know, and then we have the kind of assault against public education and the corruption of the media. I mean, the fact that Fox News is even considered a kind of news organization is staggering, although I don't think CNN's much better. All of that contributes to a kind of yearning for a system or a figure that can promise to tame the demons that have been unleashed. And I don't see anything out there. We don't have any unions. Media itself is owned or operated by large corporations. I don't know that we have any mechanisms left by which we can effectively push back. And this kind of pleading with people like Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi to give us a guaranteed income or halt evictions or open the prisons or give us health care. But that's what it is begging. We don't have any ability to pit power against power. So we can beg all we want. We're not going to get it.
Well, and just talk about an image that speaks 1,000 words. So Trump is giving that quote unquote press conference, which is just another version of his hate rallies. And who's on the stage with him? The leading corporations, their CEOs. And you're sitting there saying, this is the ruling class. These are the people calling the shot and going back to profits over people. Neoliberalism is quote unquote socialism for the rich. And to hell with everybody else. They don't even try to hide it. But again, going back to the mainstream corporate media, by definition, because it's the news media, you have so few voices who are willing to say, look at this obscenity.
The oligarchs don't care about democracy. They don't care about truth. They are not interested in the consent of the governed. They could care less about social and income inequality. They're never going to do anything about the surveillance state. In fact, as things deteriorate, they're going to expand it. They look at endless war as a business. They don't care about job losses because Marx said it creates greater pools of desperate surplus labor. They don't care about the climate. It's all about the primacy of profit and corporate power. And that's what's extinguished our democracy. Any cost. They want the continued increase and consolidation of their wealth. And this has always been, the pathology is the right word, the pathology of the ruling corporate elite. You can't work within the system. They have destroyed all of the mechanisms within the system by which we might be able to shatter the hegemony of corporate and oligarchic power. So any meaningful reform long been extinguished. The only change that's going to come, and of course they're all thrilled that nobody can go out in the streets because you have to stay 6 feet away from each other, going to be acts of mass mobilization and civil disobedience. You know, we have a corporate duopoly, as Ralph Nader says, and you can either vote for nativists and racists and climate deniers and creationists on one end, or you can vote for people who speak in the language of tolerance and, are willing to put gay people or women or people of color into positions of power as long as they serve the system, which is, of course, exactly what Barack Obama did at our expense.
If this is a society that's in the midst of a collective nervous breakdown, right? Everything is being exposed, not going to be able to reconcile it. We got to diagnose the disease, the elements of the disease.
Let's take Biden. So what does it mean to vote for Joe Biden? Now, he has this kind of goofy, even, I don't find him charming, but some people do, persona. But what is his record? It means that you vote for the humiliation of courageous women like Anita Hill, who confronted her abuser. You vote for the architects of endless war. You vote for the apartheid state in Israel. You vote for wholesale. I'm talking about all the positions Biden supported. You vote for wholesale surveillance by the government, including the abolition of due process and habeas corpus. You vote for austerity programs. You vote for the destruction of welfare. That was Biden. You vote for cuts to Social Security, which he has repeatedly called for, along with Medicaid. You vote for NAFTA. You vote for free trade deals. You vote for a real decline in wages and the loss of hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs. You vote for the assault on public education, the transfer of federal funds for for-profit and Christian, quote-unquote, charter schools. You vote for the more than doubling of the prison population. You vote for the tripling and quadrupling of sentences. You vote for a huge expansion of crimes meriting the death penalty, which he repeatedly bragged about. You vote for militarized police, vote against the Green New Deal. You vote against immigration reform. You vote for limiting a woman's right to abortion and reproductive rights. You vote for segregated public school system. Remember, he was at the forefront of stopping busing, in which wealthy, mostly white people receive educational opportunities and poor people of color don't. You vote for punitive levels of student debt and the inability of yourself to free it through bankruptcy. You vote for deregulating the banking industry and the abolition of Glass-Steagall. You vote for for-profit insurance and pharmaceutical corporations. You vote against the possibility of universal health care. You vote for huge, wasteful, bloated defense budgets. You vote the use of unlimited oligarchic and corporate money to buy the elections, and he's been funded by these people. And you vote for a figure who, when he was in the Senate, abjectly served the interests of MBNA, the largest independent credit card company, which also employed his son Hunter. So that's what you vote for. That's what you're voting for.
And then beyond Biden, always saying, what is this an example of going to these hallucinatory ideologies? I mean, what are some of the other hallucinations?
Well, I think the biggest hallucination is the list I just read. That's what you get by voting for Biden, which is more of the same. The ruling elites would prefer Biden, just like they preferred Clinton. Trump's vulgar and inept and an embarrassment. But the ruling elites also made it abundantly clear, there were several articles in the New York Times, many of these people were quoted by name, that if Sanders was the nominee, or even Warren, they'd vote for Trump.
Thinking again about the corporate mainstream media, and you can look at CNN, you can go to all the usual suspects, right? There's a narrative that Trump is doomed. This will be his end. Looking at polling data, all the variables say he's going to lose. And I'm saying, number one, there's no guarantee you're going to have an election. And number two, given his hypnotic hold over his public, never mind other means of rigging elections, if anything, I think he's going to become more powerful, and we may not even have election. And you have all these folks who are these hope peddlers.
Yeah, but that's what the liberal elites do. They drive me crazy because it's hope that's not grounded in an understanding of the political reality. I don't think that Biden will necessarily be able to win against Trump. I think he's an extremely weak candidate because he represents all of those neoliberal policies that the Democratic Party has embraced that everybody is revolting against.
And for me, I'm just like, my God, people, they're telling you what you're going to do. They're showing you how they're going to carve you up, and you're not doing a damn thing about it.
Well, but I go back to the media. What's CNN? It's just the ESPN of news. And we got to find some Yahoo somewhere in Ohio who's an idiot and a racist to fight with Van Jones. I mean, it's just carnival barking. It's vaudeville. It's burlesque. It's a massive 24/7 Punch and Judy show. It's nothing to do with news. You're right. People should be ringing the alarm bells to all of this. But we've been so pushed to the margins. And those of us who care about the open society and the rule of law, that we don't have a voice. And with the breakdown of the credibility of neoliberalism, because it has lost its credibility across the political spectrum, critics such as myself or Noam Chomsky or many others have been targeted by algorithms and smeared by mainstream media as stooges of a foreign power. It is a fear of critics of neoliberalism and corporate capitalism, which doesn't come from the power of those critics, because we don't have any power, but from the fact that they don't have a counter argument. So they don't want the critique heard. And CNN going to offer it, and neither's Rachel Maddow.
The idea of the miner's canary, that all these policies are tested on poor people, especially in this country, poor black and brown folk. And you try to communicate to especially middle class and even white working class brothers and sisters. They did it to us first. And I was talking to Eddie Glaude about this. Imagine an America where white folks understood how racism hurt them too. Look, they've tested it and they're coming for you. But they're in such denial. And then it happens. And they don't have the cognitive tools, the emotional tools to handle it, to prepare, to ally and unite and fight back.
Baldwin writes about how black people don't have midlife crises because they don't buy into the myth. They know it's fixed from the moment they come out of the womb. White people buy it. And that's why the highest rates of suicide right now are middle-aged white men, because they got out there and realized the system doesn't care. They are completely superfluous. And racism has always been a really effective tool, not only in terms of creating class divisions, but it's a very effective tool in terms of getting in the hands of the oligarchic elite, especially the Democratic Party, and getting people who don't have Confederate flags slapped on the back of their pickup truck to support neoliberal policies.
We take a snapshot of this moment in these crises. What is this saying about our death anxieties as a culture? Because the seeds are there and people are in denial.
This is what Freud called thanatos, or the death instinct. Freud never actually used the word thanatos, but later Freudians applied it, thanatos being the god of death. So Freud argued that eros, love instinct, the instinct to preserve and nurture and create and life, that they were always in conflict, both within individuals and society. So Freud writes Civilization and its discontents on the eve of the rise of fascism and war in Europe, and talks about those post-World War I society being gripped by the death instinct. And I think that's right. I think that, corporations ultimately don't create, they destroy, but it's the confusion of destruction with creation. Trump cannot create anything. He can only destroy. They destroy the environment. They destroy nation states. They destroy democracy. They're busy, as we speak, destroying lives because lives are being sacrificed on the altar of profit. They've destroyed whole countries in the Middle East. They destroy. I covered war. I spent 20 years as a war correspondent, and I watched how that lust for the death instinct, and I write about this in my book, Wars, a Force That Gives Us Meaning, is intoxicating. It gives a false sense of empowerment. And it's even seductive. I would even use that word, seductive. The annihilation of others ultimately leads to self-annihilation, and sociologists like Emile Durkheim argue that those who seek the annihilation of others deep within them are actually seeking self-annihilation. So the climate itself, our assault on the ecocide that we're carrying out, is a kind of willful collective suicide. All the science is there, we all know. And we stand by with our mouths agape in front of screens while we die, collectively. I don't see any way that we're going to go back. And then, if you want to know how you have to act, you read Camus' The Plague, which is not just about a plague, although he very carefully studied various plagues, but it's about human decency and the capacity to retain empathy and solidarity even in the midst of a plague. And it has all sorts of allegories, Camus. Of course, he was also writing about the rise of fascism. In that sense, Camus has a lot to say to us at this moment.
What truths did we learn on this week's installment of The Truth Report? These are the good times. America's empire is in a downward spiral. The pandemic has only sped it along to an inevitable conclusion. The Democratic Party and its corporate wing are part of the problem, not the solution. Trump's pandemic will be an opportunity for the worst elements in and instincts of American society to assert themselves. This could very well lead to a full-on racial authoritarian 21st century Orwellian apartheid New America. The people must rise and resist. A renewed American society and a true we the people democracy will come from the bottom up and not the top down.
If you enjoyed this week's episode of The Truth Report, you'll likely enjoy my other podcast, The Chauncey DeVega Show, where in addition to these great conversations, I also share my commentary and analysis of the week's events. If you learned from and enjoyed this week's episode of The Truth Report, there are a number of ways to show your support. You can go to ChaunceyDeVega.com, click on the right-hand side of the screen on the PayPal link. You can also go to Patreon and search for The Chauncey DeVega Show. You can follow me on Twitter at Chauncey DeVega. You can also find me on Facebook. I want to thank all of you for downloading, tweeting, and sharing The Truth Report with Chauncey DeVega. If you're so inclined, it would be such a great help and so appreciated if you'd go over to iTunes and leave the star ranking that you believe The Truth Report deserves. And always remember, in a moment when ascended authoritarianism, fake news, racism, gangster capitalism, hatred, bigotry, and malignant reality have taken hold in America and all over the world, and where professional liars and other evildoers reign supreme, the truth is all that we have.
If we have forever, I hope we just get better, better, better. That's why it's such a shame, yeah. The ways we stay the same, same. Next motel.